Real estate investment practice problem using Excel. Price level adjusted mortgage or PLAM Part 3. Get ready because we're raising the stakes with real estate. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet, would like to follow along, note that we have 3 tabs down below: example, practice, and blank. Let's take a look at them now, starting with the example tab, in essence being an answer key. As we have seen in prior presentation, and as I would recommend when we're looking at loans that are a bit more complicated in structure, comparing them to the standard loan, which would be the 30-year fix, is where we started off in a prior presentation with the 30-year loan initial rate at the 10% being the rate of the loan that is on a fixed rate, looking at the amortization table for it so that we can contrast that to our more complex loan where we're not going to be adjusting the rate as which would happen in an adjustable rate loan, but still adjusting something, that being the ending balance based on inflation changes, which we're going to assume here to be happening on a yearly basis. Therefore, when the loan is taken out, then we have an adjustment or an agreement on how that adjustment will take place, but we don't know what the inflation is going to be in the future. Whatever the inflation is, then the adjustment will be reflecting that. Therefore, the borrower taking on more of the risk again, which could result in the lender being able to lower rates and whatnot as we adjust the risk factor that would be involved. So that means that up front, we can basically project what the inflation will be in order to make estimates to look at best case, worst case type of scenarios, what will be the impact on the payments, and so on and so forth as we go through. In our practice problem, we assumed a rate of 6% over the life of the entire loan of inflation, which again is not what would actually happen per se, because the inflation could go up, it could go down. We might make estimates where the inflation is the same for a few years and then it's going to go up or down or something like that. But it can be useful to have a nice flat rate that we're just going to assume through the life of the loan to kind of make projections on. Once we put that together, we can then adjust the inflation rate to see what the impact will be on our calculations. We then made our calculations on a year-by-year basis with this information, and then constructed the amortization table for these adjustments as well, and that's where we left off last time. Now we're going to be putting together some graphs on this and just think about what is actually happening with regards to our loan balance structure here and our payments, because we do pay this off at the end, but the balance is a little bit funny or can do some kind of strange things given the fact that we're increasing it on inflation terms. We'll also take a look at creating a pivot table and use our tools with regards to the internal rate of return calculations. So let's go on back and let's go to the practice problems now. We're going to go to the practice tab, or look at the practice tab. This has some pre-formatted worksheets for you so you can work through the practice problem with a little bit less of the formatting involved. We're going to go to the blank tab. This is where we're going to be doing the formatting as we go. We left off last time constructing our amortization table from our worksheet on the left here. So I'm going to go down to this worksheet. I'm going to ungreenify it because it's been done now. And let's start off with a graph just to think about what is happening, because we could see at the end of this, it's back down to 0, which gives us that kind of check figure, which is nice. But if we look at the loan balance, it's kind of strange. It's going up. The actual loan balance is going up, 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 and then it actually decreases sharply at the end here to bring it on back down to 0. And this is going to differ in terms of what our inflation is. You can note that the inflation here is higher than the rate. So if we got a rate that's basically locked in, but we're still impacted by the inflation because the inflation is going to be adjusted at the end of the balance. The inflation in this case is higher than the interest rate, which results in that kind of pattern. So we can map this out. Let's take a look at this way. I'm going to select the 2 columns, this column and the balance column, to make a chart. So to do this, I'm going to select this column for 30 years, and then I'm going to let go, hold down Control on the keyboard so I can select non-adjacent columns or columns that are not next to each other, and then this column. And then I'd like to make a chart or a graph based on that. So then what I would like to do, once I have those 2 data sets there, I'm going to go to Insert, and we're then going to take a look at the insert of a chart over here. I just like to go to the recommended chart. That'll be the easiest if they give me the one I want. So I'm going to go to recommended, and I'm going to take this one right there. That one looks like what I'd like to see. Double click on it. And there's then our chart. Let's just pull this on over to the right so we can see it on a side by side, and then we'll put it basically to where we want to go. So I'm going to pull this on over. So if we look at that, then we could see what happens with regards to our payments. So here's our ending balance in the life of this loan. And you could see it's basically it's increasing all the way up over here, and then it sharply basically declines until we get down to the end. And so that's, an interesting scenario given the fact, again, the interest rate is less than the inflation. Now you could change this and say, well, what if the interest rate was like 2%, which could be a common inflation rate. That's kind of what they shoot for oftentimes, a 2% growth. But things could get out of control, especially these days. People are concerned that the inflation might get out of control. If it was 2%, you could see that it's basically increasing here, and then it starts to decrease basically in year 5, and you get that nice slope going down. If it was like 1.5, then you could see it's going down from basically the start here. So you can kind of look at the spread between the inflation rate and the rate of the loan and get an idea of what the payments, what the impact will be. Let's bring it back up to 6. Now, if we do the same kind of graph this time, looking at the payments, let's just select these two and see what's happening to the payments given the fact of what's happening to the loan balance, because at the end of this thing, it needs to go to 0. So what's going to happen to the payments on a chart if we go to the insert and then we go to the recommended charts, see if it gives me the one we want. Let's take a look at this one. So let's look at the payment side of things and say, all right, well, let's see what that does. So now you can see what's happening with the payments. They're starting out here at the 477, and then you got an increase in the payments to kind of coincide with the fact that this thing needs to be paid off in the 30 years. And so you got this, the payments going up as we go through the loan process. So that trend, that, this structure of the payment structure, you can kind of compare that structure to what might happen with an adjustable rate type of mortgage, and then see which of those structures kind of better fit your plans in terms of what you're going to be doing, how long you're going to be holding with the property, what you think is going to be happening with regards to the inflation. In other words, as inflation goes up, then you would also, if you got an adjustable rate mortgage, you would expect the rate to be increasing, at a similar fashion, and that'll have a different kind of impact on the payment calculations that you'll be making based on the payment calculation. And so you could see, as the swings happen in the market, as interest rates might go up or down, you can look at the impact on the payments between, say, an ARM and between something like this where you're adjusting the ending balance. Okay, so that being said, let's put this on over to the right-hand side, and then let's do some IRR calculations, which is our other tool that we can then use to do some comparisons. Because remember, you might want to be thinking about how long you're going to be holding on to something if you're looking at structures of loans like this, and comparing it to other investments, and comparing it possibly to different scenarios like an ARM versus this type of loan or something like that. So we'll take a look at our standard tools. Now you do have you could add another column on your table here and do this on a year-by-year calculation. So let's do that first. I'm going to put my cursor on R, right-click, and insert another column. And we could say, let's just take our cash flow right here on a year-by-year basis, cash flow, and center that. And I could say, okay, the inflow is going to be the $100,000. We're assuming we got that from the lender, and then we used it to pay for the home. And then the outflows by year would be these payments times 12. So I'm going to say negative of that payment times 12. That would be my payments for year 1. And then we could copy that down all the way down to 30 years. And then we can get our total on down below. We could say this is going to be our totals. And we might want the total here. Well, let's just pick up our total at the end here. This is going to be the sum of these, and that gives us a nice kind of summary. And then we can use our IRR, the rate at which this series of payments would be 0, which is kind of like our average rate. Now, remember, we used the 4% all the way through, but then we increased the balance. So what's like really the rate then, or the rate at which this series of payments would be 0? We can use our IRR equals the IRR, the IRR calculation to do that. So we'll just go up here, IRR calc, all the way up and enter, making that a percent, percentifying it, adding a couple decimals. So we're looking 9.66, obviously substantially different than the 4%, given the fact that we're increasing the balance by the 6% and trying to roll that in to a percentage rate. So then I'm going to make this basically, let's do this whole thing. Let's put an underline here, and then let's make our brackets around this whole thing. Bracketizing it, bracketize or borderizing it, they're borders. So there we have that. Okay, so that's that. Now this is on a yearly basis though, because our IRR, remember, represents these as if they're at the end of the period. If I'm using years, then these amounts are represented as if they're at the end of the year. They actually happened in 12 equal payments. So for a more precise calculation, we can then do this on a month by month. And so we can also just use our tools for the IRR calculations, and we can assume what would happen if I held it for 3 years versus 5 years versus the life of this thing. So let's just do the life and then 5 years. So I'll do the same IRR for 30 years. And then we're going to say this is going to be the cash flow. Let's make this black and white as is our customary practice, wrapping it, centering it, and then put our amount 0, 1, 2, selecting those and dragging it on down, 360 payments down to 360 payments all the way down, centering that, center. Cash flow, we got the inflow up front of the 100,000, and then the outflows, we're just going to take that from our amortization table, the 477, where did that 100, I don't know. Then I'm going to copy that down. That changes yearly, so we got the yearly impact and adjustments on it. If we go all the way down then, and if we were to total this thing up, we're going to go all the way down so we can total it up. You gotta get all the way to the down so you can total up. So then we'll total up with the sum function. Now we're back up to the top, get to the summit of the column so we can sum it. And there we have the sum. And then we can calculate the IRR, the rate at which this series of payments would be 0. And this will be, we can compare it to what we got on the annual basis, a little bit more accurate IRR, because this is on a monthly basis of this whole series of cash flows, closing it up. That's on a monthly IRR, percentage up top, adding some decimal. We want a yearly, so I'm going to double click on it, multiply that times 12. So we're at the 9.67. We can compare that to what we got over here, which was 9.66. All right, it's pretty close. The yearly is a pretty good estimate. What if we were going to say we're going to stop this thing or cut this thing off in 5 years? Let's copy these columns from Z to AB. Say we're gonna be done with this in 5, not 30. We're not holding on to it for 30 years. Are you crazy? We're just gonna go down 5 years here, which is 60 payments, because 5 times 12 equals 60. That's why. And then we'll get rid of these bottom ones, because we're not doing that. We're not going down to 360. We're stopping after 60 payments or 5 years, and then we'll shift those up. And then that last payment we would have to then pay off. We're assuming this most likely after the adjustment took place right there, minus the last payment that we had. And then we've got the total on those equals the sum of these items, like so. And then the IRR, the rate at which that series of payments would be 0, equals the IRR, the IRR calculation. scrolling up, the rate at which these would be 0. Get to the summit of that column. You're climbing slow. It's going to be dark by the time you get to the summit of the column. And now you messed it up. So equals the IRR of these. And close that up. That would be the monthly IRR. Something is horribly wrong. Oh, that first number needs to be 100,000. That's why. Okay, so now the IRR should be populated properly. Number, percent. That would be the monthly amount. Double clicking on it, multiplying times 12. That will give us our yearly. So that would be 9.6675 if we stopped after the 5 years, the IRR calculation. Let's add our pivot tables now just to round this out, just to do our normal kind of process here. Pivot tables could help you to think about the amount of interest that you would be paying, for example, if you want to add that into your calculation. I'm going to do this fairly quickly because we've seen it in the past. Putting our cursor on the table, insert. We're going to go tables, pivot table, and then existing worksheet. And I'll just put that on over here on the side in column AN1. Okay. Do our standard pivot table stuff. Years, pulling that to the left. We want the payment. We want the interest, loan balance, loan reduction. Loan reduction and then loan balance. Let's format them by selecting our items down here. Value field settings, making number format. And we want to make it currency, or I'm going to make it brackets. You can do whatever you want. No $sign, no decimals. Okay. Okay. Second one, we're going to say number format, currency, brackets, no $sign, no decimals. Okay. Okay. Next one, value field, number format, currency, brackets, no $sign, no decimals. Okay, okay. The last one has the twisty on it. If you want to get in, you got to take the little untwist the twisty that's at the top. This is it. We want the minimum, not the sum. The minimum balance for the balance here. So then back, that's the twisty has been removed. So now we're just going to do the normal number format, currency, brackets, no $sign, no decimals. Okay. Okay. Let's do some formatting here. Put some borders around this thing. Everything needs to be in its own little box. So we got to make sure that we need borders to make sure so we can yell at anyone that goes out of their little boxy. And there we have it. And then we're going to then center this one, alignment, center that one, and then do our header formatting, home tab. We can then go to the black and white. Did we wrap the text? Let's wrap the text on this thing. Center that. All right. And then we'll squish these cells together. And that'll give us our information there. We can refresh this and we can look at our interest calculations here, which are often useful when we're taking into consideration tax implications. So there we have it. Let's just do some formatting. For formatting's sake, why are you going to do formatting? For formatting's sake. That's why. Let's make this blue bordered. Font group blue and border blue. Border blue. This one all the way down. Border blue. Border blue. So we'll make that border blue. Put some underlines at the bottom of it. Underlines. That blue goes well with the green banded. The banded green amortization table, I must say. Everything's pulling together. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know what I'm talking about. Those colors totally clash. They're not even in the same theme. What are you talking about? It's horrible. It's horrible thing that you made here. It's all ugly looking. Okay, we'll make this blue and borders. So there we have it. So there it is. I feel like it looks good. So once we have that, then you can obviously make your adjustments on the left and you can basically run different scenarios with it.